by some Indian researchers, but till about 1959, there were only 26 cases. I don't know whether you can see this slide or not, but so these cases were only 26 before 19. So I have divided it into two eras, pre-1960 and post-1960, because 1960, the actual research started very rigorously in this area. Now, the University of Virginia started first. Professor Ian Stevenson, he came to India in 1961, and then he expanded his research in different countries. And I joined him in 1973, first as a research assistant, and then subsequently as a colleague, and then I was with him for a very long time. And we have done lots of work and treaded really many places. And actual research, if you ask me, it will surprise you all that it was the first investigation that we have come across was by the Emperor Aurangzeb in the early 18th century. And he learned of a case, although he himself was a Muslim, he got interested into it. He called the witnesses in his court and then interviewed both the sides. And then he was convinced. The best part, or the corresponding part of this case, was that the child also had a birthmark, to which I'll be referring to in this particular case. In this particular lecture. Now, before I start, census of cases that are available so far after the 1960 period. Total cases on record, I'm referring to reported cases. There may be many more. So 2,650, out of which 2,078 were from Asia, out of which 50, almost 500, almost 25% from was done by us in NIMHAS with me and my associates. Then cases have been also reported and studied from other countries, Myanmar, Turkey, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, etc., and Japan. And non-tribal areas in US, tribal areas, and in Europe, Canada, Africa, and Oceania. This is about 572 cases. Now, a typical case, what happens is a child between the ages of, generally between the ages of 2 and 5, starts talking about a previous life. He says, makes some statements, insists that I was so-and-so in my previous life. This is not my family. Sometimes he outrightly rejects. And with a few statements, sometimes people are not able to make much of those out of these statements. But gradually, on child's insistence, the parents try to verify the claims of the child who says, I was so-and-so, this is my, and gives very specific, makes specific statements. And then after a time period, the parents are sort of forced to take the child to the mentioned place. And sometimes the other family hears about this child's statements and they come to meet the child. So eventually the two families concerned meet, and then they, of course, take the tests of the child in their own way. They make certain things or ask him certain questions to satisfy themselves whether this is the same child who the child remembers. That means the previous personality. We call them previous personality, the person whose life the child claims to remember. And then the two families concerned meet, and in some cases there's a difference in status or some other reasons that I'll come to gradually over the next few minutes. The two families concerned generally stop meeting after some time, but they do continue in some cases.
Hello. There is a discontinuity. Hello.
Okay, these children, they make statements about a previous life, which includes name of the previous person's life, person's name. Then mentions his mode of death. PP means here personality, previous personality. Talks about, mentions about his mode of death, and then display unusual behavior, and then which is shown in the play activities, or child mimics his previous life, or phobias related to the death of previous personality, whether it's a person or the weapon or the place where the child was killed in the previous or remembered life. And he also may have some unusual physical features, such as facial features or his gait or posture, and birthmarks and birth defects. Now, coming to the methods, what we do is we conduct multiple interviews in a team of 2 or more qualified persons. When I say multiple uh, informants on both the sides, actually, on the subject side, that is the child who remembers, and the person whose life he remembers, both the families, we can conduct interviews. First, we go to the child's side generally, and then take a note of whatever he is said by the time he reached there. And that's the reason why we interview multiple informants, because one person may be biased or whatever, and more persons, when we interview more than one people, in fact in some cases as many as 41 informants we had interviewed. But generally, on both the sides, whoever is available to give his testimony, we record it. And then after having recorded, and also whenever it's feasible for us, we uh, uh, observe the behavior of the child uh, when we are present. And when the two families concerned, sometimes we have taken the child to the previous site also and see his behavior there also, and what kind of emotions or how he behaves with them. Then we interview first-hand informants on both the sides, and also neutral informants, so that the bias is eliminated from here. Then we also examine the documents pertaining to the dates of birth of the subject, then date of death and mode of death, etc., of the previous personality. And we also conduct follow-up interviews. Now, hospital records we check in order to match the or calculate the intermission between the two lives. And also, when we see the birthmarks and birth defects, to see the location of the wounds and match them with the birthmarks on the child. Then the types of cases that we have investigated: twin cases, where one or both the twins remember previous lives, and it may be a monozygotic twins or dizygotics. I'll not be touching on that today. Then sex change cases we have, anatomical sex change, then change in religion, birthmarks and birth defects. I'll give you examples of a couple of sex change cases, and then birthmarks and birth defects. A few examples only. Then illustrative case reports, sex change cases first. The first child was a female to male. He died in an old age and in a different place, although it was the same family case. But this child, as a child, showed very conspicuous habits or behavior features. For example, he was very young, but he acted like an old lady. He would always rebuke his sister for uh, wearing fashionable clothes or doing two plaits, etc. In addition to that, he also had a birthmark, a white hair here on the, I can show you on the, on his cheek. And then this was about female to male, and he had many female characteristics. Very shy child, and would very like that old lady. He would ask her hookah, or because she died of a fracture of leg in old age, and somebody had told that if you use tobacco, you will be fine. So she used to smoke hookah, and this child also had an urge when he was young. Of course, he was never provided one, but he did ask for it. Now the next child is a male to female case, and you can see also her facial features, and she acted like a male child, and she would rebuke and use very bad foul language, and very masculine language, and also her physique was like that. Very briefly, I'm telling you about these cases. Then birthmarks and birth defective cases. This I'll skip because now the next one is, this is about a person in Farukhabad who was standing at a tea stall late in the night, and sometime late in the night, and somebody came and shot at him from a close range, and whether it was he was the target or by mistake he was shot, but he had, when he was born, he had these marks on his chest. Then we consulted the uh, post-mortem report, and the doctor and Professor Stevenson, both of them sat together and reproduced this figure from the post-mortem report, which matches precisely with the birthmarks on the child. Next is a child from Mainpuri, UP. He, when he was young in the previous life, his father was cutting fodder, and this child was trying to put his hand, was trying to feed the fodder into the machine. Father did not notice him, and he went on cutting the fodder, and this child's hand was caught in the machine. He survived that, but subsequently after a year, he died of some other illness. When he was young, somebody from the other village came and saw his fingers. And this is by the way, very, very rare defect. It's called Brachydactyly, which is very, very rare. And generally it's both hands, but he has and he only has the stumps of the right hand. And then the two families concerned eventually met, and the child was able to recognize the family members. And then he was taken to, in fact, we also had taken him to the previous family's house, and he kind of behaved like a member, and he was more comfortable in that family rather than his own family. So that's about the birth defects. Now, what we do with after collecting of data, we analyze the data. We analyze the data for a group of cases to decipher or see the recurrent features in the cases, and then we also analyze individual cases to find out the alternative interpretations for them. Under this interpretations, we have normal interpretations and also paranormal interpretations. Under normal interpretation, then when we do the group analysis, we found certain features across the cultures, what we call the universal features. That is, age of first speaking about previous life. These children start talking between the ages of 2 and 4 years of age. Then they continue till about 8 years of age. Of course, there may be outliers on both the sides. Then frequency of mention of mode of death was very high in all these children, and high frequency of violent mode of death in the previous life. These are two different things. Frequency of mention of mode of death. 74% children mentioned how they died in the previous life. But when we actually checked with the actual frequency of violent death, it was far higher than the violent death rate in the general population of that country. For example, in my case, when I did my study, it was only 6 to 7% in the general population, whereas in my cases, it was 48%, 100s. Now, culture-specific cases, for example, features median intermission, for example, varied in across cultures. It was 6 months in Lebanon, it was 15 months in India, 141 years in USA. Sex change cases, no cases in Lebanon were found. India, 9%, Myanmar or Burma, 33%. Proportion of solved versus unsolved cases. It was 80% cases were solved in Myanmar. 77% of our cases in India were solved, and 20% was solved in the US, and 80% were remained unsolved. Now, interpretations of the individual cases, as I said, we take into consideration under normal interpretations, fraud, that's the first thing. Then we have to check why the person is making up a story or contriving a case. So fraud, we see the motivation, why would, and the other features that are present in the case. We have a very few cases, very few fraudulent cases, but we very carefully examine for this hypothesis. Then once that is eliminated, we also look for fantasy, whether the child is fantasizing a life for different reasons and then imposing it on himself. But then as we saw in the previous slide, that a majority of the cases were solved in our case, in our group. So you cannot verify one's fantasies and then place a matching previous personality. So these two are very easily eliminated. Then we come to paramnesia. Paramnesia is when the two families concerned meet and they exchange the information, and sometimes they credit the child with more information from their own knowledge rather than the child has actually spoken. That could be for various reasons. We eliminate that also. Then we come to cryptomnesia. Cryptomnesia is a source amnesia. This means when the child is very young, or the family members would have learned about the normal, through the normal channels, about the murder or mode of death of the person, and then fed it to the child or communicated it to the child directly or indirectly. This is very less like, or outsider would have come to the village or their house, who would have mentioned about the, casually mentioned about the mode of death of this person. But just about the mentioning about the mode of death, other verifiable details that are given by the child, that is not possible. So we have other criteria also for elimination of this. Then we come to the genetic memory. In most of the cases, the subjects are not even the lineal descendants of the same person. They are from a different family. Sometimes, as I said, there are different castes, different religions, or different. They are almost always, there are few same family cases, but they have other positive features. I'm talking about the cases where they are not even linearly related to the subject's family. And this can very easily be set aside for one reason this, and another reason is the person before dying will not be able to pass his genes to the next person in the family. Now, the other interpretation we take into consideration is paranormal interpretations. Under this, we consider ESP and personation, which means the child is collecting this information through extrasensory perception, telepathically with the other family, from the other family, and then personating that on his own personality. That means he's collecting the information and pretending to be that person or believing that he is that person. But other than this, we haven't found any ESP or ESP abilities in these children. And all these ESP impersonation can very again be set aside because these exist independently. And then we come to the possession. That means the child has been possessed by a incarnate spirit, and then he sort of speaks to the children, this child, or who remembers a previous life. We set that aside and then come to the reincarnation. By process of elimination, we set aside all these uh, interpretations that I have just mentioned, normal and paranormal, and then we are left with the reincarnation hypothesis. There could be other features also that I'm sort of skipping now. Now, recurrent features across cultures and culture-specific features we have already done. Age at first speaking, and I said I think I'll skip that because we have already mentioned this. And okay, culture-specific features are median interval, personalities, death, and subject's birth. That also we have already covered in another slide. Now, many people think that it's encouraged by the family. The child speaks about the previous life and they gain a lot of uh, publicity and all. But in most of the cases, we have seen that the people actually, the parents do not like to talk to these children to talk about a previous life. They ignore their statements about previous life. That's why sometimes they are not even taken to the previous, or the parents don't even make an effort to take the child to the previous life, previous family, for the fear of that they may lose him. That will come to the on the next slide. They ignore the statements in a mildest form, and they don't encourage the child. Then verbally told him not to speak about previous life. Then sometimes they deride or scold the child for making such claims, and children are suppressed. And then they also take such rituals to suppress the memories. For that, what they do is they'll take them to mantravadis or some people who would try to uh, put some kind of uh, psychological suggestion to the child that if you talk, this will happen, or in some way they give some mantras to the family, and then the child that he or she should stop talking. Then there's another very common thing that they do in the northern India, particularly. They rotate the child counterclockwise on the potter's wheel so that his memories are undone. And we don't know whether because of that or because the uh, potter's wheel is uh, spins so high or so with a high speed that the child stops talking about it. Whether he actually forgets or not, we do not know, because his behavioral features continue much beyond the statements of his or imaged memories. And some people even speak medical help. I remember a case was brought to me in Bangalore, and the people they had tried all sorts of things, and then this child was sent to me, and in fact he was given some medicine, and had started uh, uh, this epileptic fits as a result of that medication that was given to him. So, why they suppress these memories? Because they believe that the previous life memories are very harmful to the child. Then they fear that the subject he will be claimed by the previous family, or they also fear that the subject would die young if he remembers a previous life. So these are the kind of beliefs they have, and they also don't like public attention. It's real nuisance for them. When we go, we sometimes had very difficult time convincing them that we are not going to, harm your child. We are just researchers. because sometimes they feel that we are government agencies, and then probably they'll have some ill influence on the family. They're very scared. So normally they are not very happy to have a child who speaks about a previous life, uh, barring a few. Then fear that, as I said, previous personality's family would claim the child, and although it doesn't have in many cases, and on religious grounds, they don't believe in this. Uh, Although we have a few Muslim cases, but people generally suppress their cases. They don't allow the child to talk. In one case, they had even boycotted the family, and they had kind of uh, they had to move from that place to another place outside the village. Then fear of being viewed as exploiting case, because many a times if there's a social distance between the two families, then the if the previous family is very highly placed, they think that they'll be exploiting the child, where these people actually don't like this, and they don't want to be viewed as exploiting the case. They think that people are that we are making a case to get some gains from the previous family. Then what are the implications? I'll quickly run over it. Now, I think this is coming in the way I could take it this much earlier. Understanding unusual behavior of infancy and early childhood in the absence of known causes or explanations. For example, phobias of childhood. Children who die, let's say, violently, or they would have a generalized phobia of the, uh, let's say, life of the person, as I said earlier. Although there's no reason for him to be scared of these persons if they see them. Then unexpected cravings or addictions in childhood. I remember there was a case child who was very young, but he asked for alcohol at a very young age, and he would play, actually mimic that. He'll take some bottles, small bottles, put some water, different colors, and then he will pretend that he's drinking alcohol. So it started at a very early age, and there was nobody who was, the family was teetotaler. So he had no modeling available to him in the family. Childhood sexuality, if uh, they they die young, or in a very sexually active age. Some of them have shown sexual precocity, as we call it. Then skills not learned in early childhood, and they show many of us are quite aware of these child prodigy cases. But just child prodigy itself is not uh, indicative or evidence of previous life. But if, in addition to the previous life memories, if a child is showing some other skills, then that is again we can understand in terms of unusual behavior. Then confusion about gender, gender and identity, because of this sex change. I've shown you only two cases as a kind of. Then next, understanding medical anomalies in the absence of known causes or explanations. For example, birthmarks. We go through this very systematically, whether there was a history which suggested that would have generated these birthmarks, then congenital defects, which are just shown, and differences in monozygotic twins, wherein they have similar intrauterine uh, uh, environment, then their environment in the family is also same, and still they have differences between them. Now, progress, what we have made since 1961, systematic verification of claims, then cross-cultural studies and analysis, in which we found universal features, culture-specific features. And then we have been studying twins sex change cases, birthmark and birth, to name a few. Where reincarnation, then Professor Stevenson published a very comprehensive 2 volumes book where reincarnation and biology intersect. And as Dr. Buria mentioned about my 2 books. And then before I close, I would close with 2 disclaimers that the interpretation of reincarnation is presented as a supplement to the present knowledge of genetics and environmental influences. It's not presented as a challenge or replacement of existing knowledge. Now, to sum up, major research in reincarnation began in the 1960s. Nearly 2,600 reported cases of different types have been investigated, analyzed across cultures. Analysis revealed some universal features as well as culture-specific features. And in current focus, current meaning now, for the few years we have started, but we are still consolidating the data. Current focus is on cases of birthmarks and birth defects and twins. Reincarnation seems to be the best among the contesting interpretations to account for all the features considered together, because each of the interpretations that I have listed earlier, each one has a weakness and cannot take into consideration all the features that have been shown in this by these children. Finding supplement and not replacing the existing findings, supplement not replacing the existing knowledge, genetics and environmental factors in understanding anomalous conditions in general and mental health conditions in particular. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Pasricha. So it was interesting. I would request all the participants, if there are any questions, they can either directly ask or they can put in the chat box also. So I will take it up accordingly. So there is already some question. So Dr. Kunal Mole from Caltech. So he's asking, Dr. Pasricha, this is very interesting. How do you get to know about the children? Do the parents of the children contact you? Is there a better means of reaching out to such children in India also? If ever you want to initiate a large-scale study.
I'm not, I couldn't get your question.
Yeah,
Can you please repeat it and a little louder?
Dr. Kunal, if you're around, ask directly if you're there.
Okay.
Should I ask the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, my first question was, and I would like to thank you first for this talk, about how do you get to know about the children? Do their parents get in touch with you? And in this age of internet and information, is there a better means of reaching out to such children India-wide if we ever want to initiate a large-scale study across the country at least?
Okay. The first question, to answer the first question, actually, we had initially the University of Virginia, they had put up the ads in the newspapers. Those days, there was no digital media at all. This is way back in the 60s I'm talking about. So they had put up ad in the newspapers. Some response had come through, and then they started going to investigate the cases. And when we were investigating the cases, one case led to the discovery of the next, because we used to go in a group and a small crowd would get around us, and then they'll say, what are you doing here in our village? Or they, out of curiosity, they'll say what we are doing. So they'll say, oh, I also know of a case. So this was in a very elementary stage. And we used to note sometimes, as Professor Stevenson used to tell me, that whatever piece of papers they had, they would make a note of the subject's details, where do they live. And sometimes the informant for the case would know about the previous personality. Sometimes they would not, they would just know about the subjects. So we would then trace those, and while studying that case, we would learn of some other cases. So that's how it started. Now, if you want to, now of course, media has also, it has both sides of the coin, I would say. This actually has, in some ways, spoiled the thing, in the sense that many people pick up the information from the thing, and then they try to uh, show this thing. But I think the best bet would be to go into those places. We have gone to very, very remote areas also those days, where we had to walk a lot of, cover a lot of mileage. And now, of course, roads are good. And I think we have to go approach these people, where we, because a lot of media, they are sort of killing the cases. They will bring the family, and then publicity, and then all those things, and some people are not very happy about it. But I think one can definitely make an approach and study cases. What I have said is, we have just started reported cases of 2,600. That number is very limited considering the total population of this globe. So I think one can go with very cautious this thing. You will have to take extra precautions. We used to take a lot of precautions in interpreting these cases. So one has to, I think, be very careful, because nowadays this media, I mean, this digital thing has reached the remote villages also. So how far we can rely on their testimony, and how much is one has to learn how to differentiate between the two statements or two testimony, and the falsification of the uh, information that we get.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree that the false positives is a very big issue.
Right, presently, yes.
I have a couple more questions, but maybe someone else can go first.
Yeah, maybe can I ask on top of that what Kunal said? So,
Maybe you can also use mic. That was very helpful.
Okay, so I'll speak louder. Is it audible now?
Yes.
Okay, so when you advertise on social media or maybe newspaper, so this issues of I mean, the cases are killed already. I mean, so how do you really tackle such issues in a modern time? Basically, if you say 20, 30 years back when there was no social media, so
Right.
this would have been the best way. But now, if you need to approach anybody in any part of the globe, so you need to spread out on social media, and that itself, I mean, is a risk. I mean,
Right.
everybody knows that this is the case, and then the opposite parties, whoever the farmer family would be, they also come to know. So,
Right. But I think there can be different ways of knowing. One thing is, of course, you have to visit and interview multiple people and more neutral informants who are not kind of related to either side of the case, previous personality or the subject side. And neutral patients, I mean, neutral informants may be more reliable in some cases. But if they're jealous of the family getting some publicity, then it's become really difficult now. But I think one can still sieve out the, what is it called, the impurities in the information. I think there should be a way. If you have a, but you have to go in a team, because sometimes our own biases come into play.
Yeah.
And that also has to be ruled out. We used to record it also. Sometimes recording, those days tape recorders were available, but that had a drawback, because later when we used to transcribe it, we could not say whose voice was this, who spoke what and all. So we always used to make I didn't show those slides to you, how we used to take note and all, because it will go much beyond our time. So I think one has to be very carefully examining this information that is available to us. Maybe we used to make several visits to the same people, time and again, same village. And as I said, in one case, we had interviewed 41 informants to each at a particular thing.
And also,
Was
what
that-
about? Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, tell me. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, what about the possibility of approaching different psychiatrists, professional psychiatrists like you, where people might be visiting, or maybe in general sense, any kind of hospital. So where we may get such cases, at least get some glimpse of possibilities of such cases. Is that also a source?
That's very less likely, I tell you, because we had one such case, but psychiatrists, I regret to say, they do not much have. First thing, they don't have time. Secondly, they do not have much background training in this. So they can very easily put them into certain categories, nosological categories or psychiatric illnesses, that because the child is speaking so and so, therefore, because they do not have the background knowledge. So unfortunately, very few people have in India. So, but to the best of my knowledge, nobody really from the psychiatry side has taken any formal training in the. One person was, from Lucknow. He came with us. He was a psychiatrist. Came with us for one trip only, and whatever he has, maybe he's making use of that. I would not deny, but I have no information from him. He's never published anything, scientific journal, so we would not know. Whatever has come to the scientific journal is from that University of Virginia group only.
So there are some
Dr. Pasricha, so it's very interesting. So I just wanted to ask whether you investigated any case of war soldiers wherein the soldier of one country is born in another country, something like that. This kind of case, because this case situation is more likely because as in Bhagavad Gita, no, Krishna says, "Yam yam vapi spran bhavam tajante kalevaram." So, because in wartime, it is mostly the psychology of the soldier is to kill the other party. So, have you encountered any case of this kind which can correlate to this?
Yes, I haven't studied, but Professor Stevenson has studied quite a few cases in Burma where they remember the life of a Japanese soldier. Oh, sorry, I think it's just by mistake it's come. So what he found was because soldiers, Japanese soldiers, the life of a Japanese soldier, they usually remembered the life, but he had to decipher from their behavioral features actually, because there was no way by which he could have, or he and his associates in Burma would have been able to verify that life. But their behavioral features, he was convinced that they were definitely, they remember the correct life of a soldier. Japanese.
And any cross-religion kind of cases?
Yes, I have quite a few. In fact, I published all these cases in the books that Professor Jyoti Ranjan has mentioned. Quite a few, but not many. I think I have. And then we have cross-religion, Muslim to Hindu, Hindu to Muslim. Then in other countries, some Christians remember their lives, which I'm not be able to, competent to tell you now. But India, definitely I can tell you that I have a few cases of change of religion.
Okay, so thank you very much. I have a couple of more questions from the participants.
Whoever has the question, please use the mic because I'm not. It's possible. Otherwise, I'm able to hear you, but then I can't register the more than one
speak
question.
louder. I'll speak louder now.
Okay.
Just a minute.
It's okay. I can ask the question if ma'am is okay with it.
Who is speaking, please? Vasuki. Yes.
This is Vasuki.
Yeah, please.
Yes, this is Vasuki. Hello, ma'am. Firstly, congratulations on the amazing work that you have done. It is nothing short of being landmark. I've been following your research work from quite some years, and I've always wondered if there's any trend in the distance of the previous life and the new life, as in, were these bound by physical location, or was the previous life in a totally different area as compared to the new one? That is my first question. And the
You
second
may.
one is there any,
Okay.
and is the second
I
question
think we'll
is
take
there
one question
any,
at a time.
Yeah, one question at a time, please. Yeah.
okay,
I'll
sure.
definitely.
I'm sorry.
No problem, because then what happens is, anyway. So I think the first question, do you mean to say from one country to another, or within a country?
Not just
Long
country,
distance?
maybe within a country, even India, it could be North
Yes.
India, South India, it could be different parts of the states. So my
Yes.
question is there any variance between the physical location that does play a role? Does the physical location
Yes.
play a role?
Mhm. See, I try to investigate some cases in the north, in the south also, when I was working in Bangalore. But we have definitely more cases in the north than in the south. And in North India, I think people are more open to visitors. And in the south, even for near-death experiences, we had little difficulty in approaching them. So I think they're not very open, and there may be some other reasons.
My question was specifically, was there any distance relation between the previous life and the new life? As in, the
Okay.
previous person was in a place A, was the new life in the nearby vicinity, or was it in a totally different
No,
location?
it's okay. It varied from a few, of course, same family cases I told you, and then also there is a few yards to several hundred meters, kilometers distance. One case I can remember is from uh, Bareilly to Varanasi. So it's almost 500 kilometers, and that's a long distance. And it was a very strong case, actually. The father of this child himself was a lawyer, and he investigated that case first, and then, of course, subsequently we followed it up. So there is a large range of, but most of the range of distance between the two personalities, but most of the cases are within a short range, what we call, it's a psychic glue that brings them back to the same area.
Okay, thank you so
Second,
much.
yes, second question.
Yes, I have the second question, which is similar. Is
Hmm.
there any relationship between the time, as in the previous person died in so and so year, and the next person, are they born very soon, or is there a lot of time between the new birth? Have you seen any cases wherein the new birth was at a much later time when compared to the previous person's death?
Yes. See, we have generally there are outliers anyway. The range, there's a big range, but the largest I can think of is 14 years in my series, and generally it's 15 months. Within 15 months, the average or median intermission. But there are long intermission cases also. One, as I said, I think you might have read about this, where she is remembered the life in a or much earlier, I think 2 generations before the present one. But mostly they are within 15 months. The range is that. Range is larger, but the average or median is 15 months.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay, so
Thank
there
you.
are 2 more questions, if you allow, ma'am. So can I go a little overboard? We have more time, ma'am. We have a couple of more questions.
Okay. If you have time, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we are available.
Because I may not be able to answer all the questions,
That's
but I'd certainly like to share with you whatever little knowledge I have.
So thank you so for that gesture. So Vartika is asking, nice research methodology, ma'am. So out of curiosity, does the death of previous personality and birth of the child coincide? I think time you already answered, I guess. Or do you have anything more to say? In terms of maximal time, as you mentioned, some 15 months or so. Is that
No. Median is 15 months. Maximum in my case was 14 years, in my series. And I think together when we studied a few cases, Dr. Stevenson and I, there was one case wherein she was born about 2 generations before, or even there was a larger intermission. Offhand, I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. So Ram Chaubey is asking, can you discuss or describe some specific cases in detail? So he wants the full story. So maybe
Full stories, I think we'll need a full full hour to
maybe we can refer to your books. That would be the best way.
Huh?
Your books, your papers. That would be the best way to.
Yes, I think that would be the best thing. And I have given quite a few in the second, Can the Mind Survive Beyond Death? In that, in fact, the first one I had given only 6 or 7, 8, 7 case histories. So people ask me, why don't you give us more case histories? Because some people get more interested into those. So in the second volume, there are quite a few. Second book, there are quite a few case histories.
Okay, that's nice. So maybe I would request all our participants. They can have a copy of ma'am's book, and they can refer to the articles ma'am has published. So before I go to some more questions, I would like to announce that we are soon starting our projects on ND and reincarnation. So I would be requesting ma'am also to be part of that discussion and help us and guide us. So in that, I would request all the participants, whoever are interested, so please drop a mail to us. I already pasted the links, the email addresses for your convenience. I'm putting it once again. So either you write us on issdelhi.info@gmail.com or info@issdelhi.com.
I have I've given my email address on my the first slide. So
Okay.
if you write to me, maybe I can attend to your.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there are 2 hands still raised. So you can go. Do you want to ask directly, or you want to place your questions? You can unmute yourself. Chaitanya Leela and Arfin Kuresi.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's so wonderful to hear. And yes, I have a question. I just also wanted to say that I'm from England. I'm from the UK, and I'm the head of a mental health service at a university here. And I'm also a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and I do past life regression as well. So in my work as well, I also study astrology. So in my work also, I look into people's past lives, but using hypnotherapy and doing past life regression. So I would love to, be more involved if there's any way. I'm actually coming to India tomorrow. I'm flying to India tomorrow to get married, but I would love to meet anyone if possible. I'd really love to work or maybe do something together. But I will have a question, which was, in these cases, was there anything found out about perhaps the purpose? So why these particular children were remembering that particular life? Was there any sort of reason, purpose that soul was trying to fulfill through that recall of the past life?
There could be. One was, of course, this more traumatic experiences that they had. But we have also cases where they did not have a very traumatic. There are different reasons given by these children. I do not have a ready answer for this, but violent death, mode of death was one reason of remembering, because this was one has kind of gone through it himself. So these children remember their previous lives, and then their love for the previous family. Then there was unfinished business there they had to complete. I remember having listed that somewhere, this also, that why they remember, some of them remember, but they have different reasons. As I said, one lady, for example, she had left a young child, very young child, and then she died. So that was the kind of unfinished business, and she would play mother. she would collect some stones actually, treat them as children. So very young age, they start, as I said, behavioral features. They start showing, reliving their previous life. So one could be unfinished business. Another one would be a violent mode of death. Then special attachments. Right now I can think of these three only, but I have listed them somewhere in one of these books.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Afrin Qureshi, would you like to ask?
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Afreen, and I'm also I'm in my third year of doing psychology honors, and I'm also looking forward for clinical psychology in future for my masters. So, ma'am, my question was that, like, in like very normal cases every day, not past life, there are like various traumatic cases, like example, child abuse. So in the cases of past life, like, you know, past people who remember their past life, what is the next step you do? Like if there's a child abuse case, or there's a very acute traumatic case for the children, so what do we do in such cases? Like if it is not and in the like normal cases, we do use like EMDR and other therapies for trauma, but what do we do in these cases if there's such huge trauma?
I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm,
Mhm.
but I think we're digressing from the today's topic. You're talking purely about the clinical cases that you can perhaps discuss with any clinical psychologists who are trained by us from NIMHANS, and there are quite a few in Delhi. But
Yeah.
isn't it? So if it was something related to the past life or the reincarnation, today,
Yeah, and I'm on another question was like in past life regression, how accurate is, like if a person doesn't remember anything about the past life and if the person goes through past life regression, so how much is it like accurate?
I think this past life regression itself, I do not subscribe to that much, because there can be very many flaws. So I personally don't subscribe to that.
Yes.
All right.
Ma'am.
Okay. Can we?
Dr. Saab, one more question, a little question. Do you have any case where people remember the in-between time, what was there? I mean, from the previous birth to this birth, what has happened in between? So do you have any story of that period?
We have only 2 or 3 cases, but in Thailand, there are quite a few cases that Dr. Stevenson had studied. And these are, I think, I can remember one case wherein he said that he had gone to, I think it's very much like near-death experiences, that he had gone to the other world and there he stayed and whatever. Now we have no way of verifying that. And very few, one said that he was sitting on a tree in discarnate form. Then when his father was passing through on a bike, so he came along with him. So these kind of few examples, I mean, few descriptions we have received, but other than that, I don't remember.
Okay. Okay. So no pattern kind of thing.
No pattern in this, particularly in this group of cases or series of cases that we have studied. But some, as I said, in Thailand, some people have mentioned about the in-between, what happened during the intermission period.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Any further questions for the participants? Or,
You have more questions? I think we have to call it a day now.
yeah, I think so. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time and patiently answering our questions. So we'll be in touch with you as we progress in our study, and we certainly like to learn from you, from your vast
Sure.
decades of experience. And this is very rare, actually. I mean, you in India and Dr. Stevenson in West Virginia. I don't know any other third case apart from his colleagues.
His colleagues there, yes.
Yeah. I don't know any third case who pursued this study so seriously. So certainly we'd like to learn from you. So thank you very much for kindly agreeing to.
I must thank you for having given me this opportunity actually to, I get back in this world of my research. So this is good to be in the company of people like you.
Yeah, we'll be happy to learned from you. So thank you very much for being here.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
So anytime you come to Delhi, please let us know.
Yeah, in fact, I was hoping that for this lecture, I'll go to Delhi, and because I don't like this, I wrote you also,
Yeah,
I don't like this online kind of a thing. It's very distressing sometimes. But anyway, something is.
In future, please, anytime you visit Delhi, please let us know. You can organize.
Yes, I was there a bit just before the corona or COVID breakdown with these lamas or a Tibetan house. So personally, I had visited them, and then of course on invitation. But definitely, I travel very less these days. But if I happen to come there, definitely I'll inform you.
Thank you so much. Right. And also, as a final note, those who are interested in this field, they can write to Dr. Pasricha, that's the email address, drpasricha@gmail.com, or to us also, issdelhi.info @gmail.com or info@issdelhi.org. And of course, I just small few announcements. If you wish, you can log out. So just few announcements about our ISS activities. So if you could stop sharing your screen, so I can show some announcement about future events. So,
sorry.
If you could kindly stop sharing your screen. So
okay, that, I will do that. Stop share. Okay.
So following this meeting, so from 24th, 1st and 8th March, so we'll be having a distinguished. March? Yeah, 24th April, 1st May, sorry, March, 1st May and 8th. Sorry.
No problem.
So, Sriman Kamal Luchan Das from ISKCON Mira Road is a very widely known scholar on many different aspects. Practically, he's an encyclopedia on Indian philosophy. So, he's coming. So, you know. Okay. So, he will be talking on 6 systems of Indian philosophy: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Vedanta, and all that. So then, so ma'am, also if you are available, you can surely be part of that. We'll be happy to have you also. And all the participants who are interested, they can join.
Okay.
And also, we have a conference, annual conference on environment. We do it in the May-June month. So we have this second 3 years international virtual conference. We have many international and national dignitaries like Sachin Chaturvedi and Mr. Bharat Bhushan Tyagi, Professor Ravi Gupta from Utah University, Professor Ramesh Gola, and many others. Okay. And those of you who are interested, the participants, they can, if they're interested to write anything, they can certainly write.
And we can join you. Okay.
Yeah, so you can join. So this is on 4th and 5th June. So stay tuned. And also we have a couple of more sessions. They are not yet finalized. As it gets finalized, we'll let you know. So thank you very much for your kind presence and attending. There is, I think Chaitanya is still raising her hands. So.
Sorry, I just haven't loaded it. Excuse me.
Okay. Thank you. So let's call this a day. So. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. And also, any of the participants, they want to know anything about ISS and its activities, please feel free to